Welcome back, everyone, to Sip and Talk.
Great to be back.
So last time we kind of touched on this whole mine thing in China, right?
Yep.
That feeling of possession.
Yeah, that sort of proprietary assertion, as we called it.
Well, today we're taking that idea and really like zooming in on something specific.
Okay.
You know, when you hear about Chinese folks visiting, say, the Forbidden City, or maybe more pointedly, the British Museum.
I know where you're going with this.
And they see these amazing Chinese artifacts, and the reaction is just this instant, loud, mine. These were all stolen.
Right. It's a very common, very emotional response you hear about.
Exactly. So that's what we're digging into. What's really behind that? Like, what's the real purpose? What are the different angles here?
And importantly, where do the facts line up? Or where do they maybe not line up? What are the contradictions?
Yeah, the fallacies, the facts, the whole messy picture.
And we're also going to flip the script a bit, right?
Oh, so
We need to talk about the other side, the cultural heritage, the artifacts that got destroyed inside China, especially since the Communist Party took power. You can't really understand the first part without the second.
Oh, absolutely. That's crucial context.
Yeah.
So we're aiming for, a balanced look, objective international perspective, maybe even a little humor where we can find it.
Definitely need some humor for this topic.
All right, grab your favorite drink, settle in, and let's talk.
Let's do it.
Okay, so let's start with that scene. The visitor in the British Museum, maybe looking at some incredible jade or porcelain, and that immediate mine, stolen reaction. It's powerful.
It really is. And the first thing to understand is it's usually not just a simple outburst. It often taps into something deeper psychologically, something called compensatory nationalism.
Compensatory nationalism. Okay, break that down a bit.
Well, think about it. If a group feels like historically they've been wronged, humiliated, or maybe they feel powerless right now, they might try to sort of compensate for that by latching onto symbols of national pride really strongly, like cultural heritage. It becomes a way to reclaim dignity.
So it's like punching back symbolically through history.
Kind of, yeah. And you absolutely have to connect it back to China's century of humiliation, roughly 1839 to 1949.
And opium wars, unequal treaties, foreign powers carving things up.
Exactly. That narrative, that story of being bullied and deprived, it's not just history class stuff. It's drilled into people from when they're kids.
Right.
So fast forward, you're an adult, you see a piece of your history in a foreign museum. Boom, it hits that nerve. It feels like proof of that old wound.
The artifact itself becomes like Exhibit A for the historical grievance.
Perfectly put. And there's another layer. It can be a projection, a way to deal with feeling powerless now.
How do you mean?
Well, if you feel like you can't really change things in your own life or influence big government decisions, maybe complaining about corruption feels risky, or tackling social inequality seems impossible. It can feel maybe easier or safer or just more emotionally resonant to focus that frustration on something external, like demanding back artifacts. They stole our past. It's a target you can actually point at.
So you channel that energy. If I can't fix this problem at home, I'll focus all my anger on that historical issue over there.
Precisely, especially in systems where, let's say, democratic channels for voicing dissent or protecting your rights are limited. Cultural identity becomes a really, really important way for people to find dignity and make their voices heard, even if indirectly. It's a rallying point.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense psychologically, but it's not just happening in a vacuum, right? The government plays a role here.
Oh, absolutely. This isn't just like a grassroots feeling bubbling up entirely on its own. The CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, has been pretty savvy about amplifying this stolen heritage victim narrative.
Why? What's in it for them?
Well, a few things. First, it's a fantastic way to divert attention from domestic problems.
The classic look over there tactic.
You got it. If people are fired up about getting a vase back from London, maybe they're a bit less focused on, say, local corruption or environmental disasters or the slowing economy. It redirects that public anger outwards, towards the West, towards former colonial powers. Very useful.
Keep them looking outward, not inward.
Exactly. Second, nationalism itself is a powerful glue.
How so?
In a system without, multi-party elections or that kind of democratic participation, what holds things together? Strong national feeling. And us versus them mentality, often fueled by historical grievances, can be a really effective stabilizer for the regime. It unites people under one banner, even if they have lots of internal disagreements.
A common enemy or a common historical wrong unites the tribe.
You could say that. And third, it ties perfectly into the whole China's rise narrative.
Connect those dots.
The message becomes, look, we were weak, they took our stuff. Now China is strong again, we're rising. So, naturally, our treasures should come back home. It frames the return of artifacts not just as correcting a past wrong, but as proof of China's current strength and rightful place in the world. Each return piece is like a mini victory lap for the nation's rejuvenation.
Wow. Okay, so it's history, psychology, and a very calculated political strategy all rolled into one.
It's a potent mix.
But.
Yeah.
And there's always a but, isn't there? When you start poking at this mine, stolen narrative, some pretty big holes start to appear. Some inconvenient truths.
Oh, definitely. The logic gets messy fast when you look closer. Let's call the first big one selective amnesia, especially regarding the Cultural Revolution.
Ah, okay. This is the internal destruction part you mentioned.
Exactly. Here's the giant irony. A lot of the artifacts sitting safely in museums abroad. If they had stayed in China, there's a very real, very high chance they would have been destroyed during the Cultural Revolution.
Between 1966 and 76, right?
Yeah.
The Destroy the Four Rolls campaign. Yeah.
That's the one. They went after anything considered old. Old ideas, culture, customs, habits. Buddhist statues were smashed, ancient scrolls and books burned, temples desecrated, paintings torn up. The scale of destruction was immense.
So it's a bit rich to demand back something that might have ended up in a bonfire if it hadn't left.
It's more than a bit rich, it's a massive historical contradiction. It requires completely ignoring or downplaying this huge wave of internal cultural destruction while focusing only on the external loss.
It's like, okay, here's an analogy. It's like you smash up your own kitchen, break all your plates, then run next door screaming because your neighbor has one of your old bowls that they bought legally years ago, and you yell, "You stole my bowl!" while your own kitchen is still in ruins.
That's actually a painfully accurate analogy. You destroyed your own stuff, but you're mad someone else saved a piece. It highlights the selective memory perfectly.
Okay, so that's a big one. What else complicates the everything was stolen idea?
Yeah. The simple fact that not everything was stolen. The narrative often paints this picture of British soldiers storming in and looting everything. And yes, looting absolutely happened. The sacking of the old summer palace, Yanmingwen, in 1860 is a horrific example, no question.
Right.
But that's not the only way artifacts left China. Many, many items in places like the British Museum were acquired through legitimate means.
Like what?
Like legal purchases from dealers over decades, sometimes centuries. Or diplomatic exchanges between governments, or private donations from collectors who had bought things legally themselves. Museums often have detailed records of provenance showing how they acquired pieces.
So paperwork exists for a lot of this stuff.
For a lot of it, yes. And here's another point people often miss. During the late Qing Dynasty, early Republic period, times were chaotic, China was unstable, people were poor. Chinese officials, nobles, merchants, they sold artifacts abroad. Sometimes to survive, sometimes because they thought the pieces would be safer elsewhere, sometimes just for profit. These weren't foreign armies looting, these were commercial transactions initiated from within China.
Whoa, okay. So some of the stuff people claiming was stolen was actually sold by Chinese people. That really muddies the waters.
It does. It makes the simple victim narrative much more complex.
It's like seeing a rare book in a library, perfectly preserved, and shouting, "That's mine, you stole it." Even though the records show the library bought it fair and square from your great uncle who needed cash back in the day, and maybe your own bookshelf at home is, well, let's just say, not in great shape.
That captures the disconnect really well. Which brings us to a third point. Disregarding the idea of universal cultural property.
What do you mean by that? Isn't culture national?
It is, but there's also this growing idea, especially for really significant items, that they belong to all of humanity, not just one modern nation state. Think about, say, ancient Egyptian artifacts or the Rosetta Stone.
Right, they feel like world heritage.
Exactly. The argument is that some things transcend modern borders. The purely nationalistic, it's ours and only ours, cry kind of ignores that possibility of shared global heritage.
So the idea is that maybe the best place for some items is where they can be preserved, studied, and seen by the most people globally.
That's part of the argument, yes. Museums abroad often function as custodians. They pour huge resources into conservation, security, research, and display. They make these things accessible, often for free, to millions of people from all over the world who might never get to China.
They're keeping it safe and sharing it.
In many cases, yes. Now, that doesn't excuse actual theft or looting, let's be clear. But it complicates the idea that just because something originated in one place, its only value is in being physically returned there, especially if the capacity for preservation or access might be better elsewhere.
It's like that analogy again. Your mom lost your favorite toy in a poker game, maybe, or sold it. The neighbor bought it, fixed it up, kept it pristine on their shelf for 30 years for everyone to see. Now you show up demanding it back, ignoring all the care they took.
Yeah. The history of how things move around is messy. The pure buy mine shout kind of bypasses all that complexity. It's very visceral.
It really does sound like that child analogy you used earlier, like a giant baby seeing candy.
It can come across that way, yeah. It's an immediate emotional grab. You have it. It used to be near me, therefore you stole my candy, even if maybe you're the one who threw the candy on the floor and stomped on it earlier.
Oof. Yeah, it sidesteps the whole process, the history, the legality.
It absolutely does. And it prevents a more grown-up conversation about what responsible stewardship of culture actually looks like.
Okay, so given all this, the selective memory, the legitimate sales, the idea of global heritage, what are the bigger questions we should be asking, beyond just shouting slogans?
Well, one huge one is, should we think more internationally about cultural heritage? Is there a model beyond just pure nationalism? If something is truly a treasure of human civilization, where does it provide the most value? Is it always about repatriation, or is global access and top-notch preservation sometimes more important?
That's a tough one. No easy answers there.
None at all. Another question, what about China's own lending practices? They have incredible collections, right? The Forbidden City, the stuff in Taipei's National Palace Museum, which is just vast.
Unbelievable collection.
But how often do they lend those treasures out for major international exhibitions compared to, say, the Louvre or the Met? Not nearly as often. So if the argument is all about cultural exchange and seeing your stuff, shouldn't that be a two-way street?
Good point. Are they practicing what they preach regarding access?
It's a valid question, and maybe the most pointed one. Shouldn't domestic preservation be the top priority if the goal is genuinely to protect Chinese culture? Shouldn't the focus be on massively investing in protecting sites within China, upgrading museums there, training conservators, stopping the ongoing looting and smuggling? Because frankly, the infrastructure and resources for preservation in many parts of China are still lagging. Is demanding things back the cart before the horse if you can't guarantee their safety and care once they arrive?
Wow, okay. So ultimately, if you truly love the culture, maybe the first step is ensuring its safety and accessibility wherever it currently is, and building the capacity to care for it properly at home, rather than just demanding its return based on emotion.
I think that's a more constructive way to frame it. It requires looking at the whole picture, historical context, legal status, preservation standards, and the benefits of global access, not just a gut reaction of mine.
Let's make this more concrete. Can you give some specific examples of artifacts and controversies that illustrate these points?
Sure. Let's start with the famous 12 zodiac heads from Yuanmingyuan, the old summer palace.
Looted in 1860, right?
Yeah.
During the Second Opium War.
Exactly. Clear case of military plunder. Two of them, the rat and the rabbit, were eventually bought at auction by a Chinese collector and returned in 2009. This fits the stolen and returned narrative perfectly.
Okay, straightforward case.
Then you have the Yuanmingyuan stone pillars. 7 of them. They were returned from Norway just recently in 2023.
Also looted.
Here's the twist. No. Norway had actually acquired them legally over time through various purchases and donations. Their return wasn't legally required due to theft. It was more of a diplomatic gesture of goodwill.
So return doesn't always mean giving back stolen goods. Sometimes it's diplomacy.
Precisely. Then there's the incredible painting, The Admonitions of the Court Instructor scroll at the British Museum, ancient 5th to 7th century.
Wow.
The museum bought it in 1903. China wants it back. But its history before the museum acquired it isn't crystal clear like the Zodiac heads. It wasn't direct war loot from a specific event. Its journey is more complex.
So the stolen claim there is maybe more debatable.
It's certainly less clear-cut than the Yuanmingyuan items. And then there are recent examples like the Yuhuchen vase, a Ming Dynasty jade piece. The British Museum bought it legally in 2017.
Bought it legally recently.
Yep. And yet its display still triggered a huge wave of mine stolen comments on Chinese social media. It shows how powerful the narrative is, sometimes even overriding easily verifiable facts about legal acquisition.
The feeling trumps the facts.
Often, yes. Which brings us to that Chinese netizen controversy you mentioned earlier. Someone basically said online, hey, maybe we should thank the British Museum because if this stuff hadn't gone there, it might have been destroyed during the Cultural Revolution.
Oh boy, I bet that went over well.
Like a lead balloon, the person got absolutely slammed, viciously attacked online.
Just for suggesting that maybe, just maybe, an outside institution played a role in preserving something from internal destruction.
Exactly. It hit that nerve we talked about. It showed how incredibly sensitive the topic is and how resistant the dominant narrative is to any complication, especially one that involves acknowledging internal failings.
So the irony is, the netizen might have had a point. The museum did likely save things that would have been lost, but that historical nuance gets crushed under the weight of the simpler, more emotionally satisfying they stole it all story.
That's often what happens. The complex reality, which includes both colonial exploitation and preservation efforts, gets flattened into a single politically useful narrative. Okay, so we've talked a lot about the claims directed outwards. Now we absolutely have to pivot and look inwards. What actually happened to cultural heritage inside China?
Right, because while people are shouting, mine, mine, about things in London or Paris, what was happening back home? You mentioned the Cultural Revolution.
Let's start there. The Cultural Revolution's devastation from 66 to 76, it's almost impossible to overstate the damage. That Destroy the Four Olds campaign wasn't just rhetoric, it was brutally effective.
We're talking physical destruction.
Massive physical destruction. Temples, statues, books, paintings, historical sites. Estimates run into the hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of items damaged or obliterated. Records are spotty because, well, it was chaos, and documenting destruction wasn't the priority.
Can you give a sense of the scale, like in a specific place?
Beijing, the capital. Between 1966 and 1972, estimates suggest nearly 5,000 out of about 6,800 protected cultural sites were damaged. 30 were completely wiped off the map, gone forever.
5,000 sites damaged in just Beijing.
And think about the Red Guard plunder. Millions of items were confiscated from private homes, temples, museums. Some were burned publicly, others thrown into warehouses, often poorly managed, where they deteriorated or vanished. Some definitely ended up on the black market, smuggled out of the country. So ironically, some of the stuff that ended up abroad left because of the internal chaos and destruction.
So the very movement demanding return might be asking for items that only survived because they were smuggled out during a period of internal destruction.
That is absolutely part of the complex picture, yes. And the targets were iconic. The Confucius Temple and Cemetery in Quofu, massively damaged. Over 6,600 artifacts reportedly destroyed there alone. The Wanli Emperor's tomb. Opened, desecrated, remains destroyed. Ancient temples, gardens, stone inscriptions across the country systematically targeted. Feimin Temple, with its priceless Buddhist relics, was also heavily damaged.
So it really is like smashing your own family china, then yelling at the neighbor for having a piece you didn't smash yourself.
The analogy holds up disturbingly well. The scale of self-inflicted cultural wounds during that period was catastrophic.
Okay, that was the Cultural Revolution.
Right.
But the loss of artifacts didn't stop then, did it? You mentioned tomb raiding.
Right. This is huge, and it's ongoing. The shadowy world of tomb raiders and smugglers has been bleeding China's underground heritage dry for decades, from the Republic era right up to today.
This is Chinese people digging stuff up illegally and selling it.
Primarily, yes. It's a massive illicit industry, driven by both domestic and international demand for antiquities. There are laws against it, of course, but enforcement is incredibly difficult.
Wow.
Vast country, remote sites, lack of resources, sometimes local corruption. It's hard to police everywhere. These raiders are often highly organized, using modern tech, walkie-talkies, GPS, metal detectors, even oxygen tanks for deep digs, chainsaws to cut through things.
They're sophisticated operations.
Very, and the stuff they find, it flows overseas. Quickly, through networks into Hong Kong, Taiwan, Europe, the U.S., ending up in private collections or auction houses. Every time that happens, not only is the object lost, but the entire archaeological context, crucial for understanding history, is destroyed.
Any idea of the scale?
Well, just one example.
Yep.
In 2015, authorities busted a ring dealing in artifacts worth over $50 million. And you hear about figures like Yao Tong, a tomb-robbing master who ran a network across 7 provinces. This isn't petty crime, it's big business.
So this is like your own family members sneaking out at night, digging up the ancestral treasures buried in the backyard, selling them off cheap, and then the next day, everyone blames the antique shop owner down the street for having them.
That's another painfully apt way to put it. A significant amount of heritage leaves China not through foreign invasion, but through internal criminal activity. And that part of the story often gets conveniently left out of the mine, is all stolen narrative.
Okay, so Cultural Revolution destruction, ongoing tomb raiding, any other ways culture has been lost internally?
Oh, yes. Modern destruction in the name of progress.
Like development projects.
Exactly. Especially during the rapid urban development after the economic reforms kicked in. How many historical neighborhoods, old city walls, traditional courtyards, think Beijing's hutongs got bulldozed for skyscrapers, shopping malls, and highways?
Countless, I imagine. Shanghai lost most of its city wall. Beijing, too.
Right. It was often framed as necessary modernization, sweeping away the old to make way for the new. Even sections of the Great Wall weren't immune, sometimes cannibalized for building materials.
So you tear down your own history for a karaoke bar or an apartment block, then get sentimental about a preserved temple gate in a foreign museum.
It highlights a certain inconsistency, doesn't it? If it was so precious, why didn't you keep it? And big projects, too. Think of the Three Gorges Dam.
Oh, yeah. Huge environmental impact, but also cultural.
Massive cultural impact. Countless archaeological sites, ancient villages, temples, inscriptions, all submerged forever underwater. An incalculable loss of history and heritage sacrificed for hydroelectric power.
So destruction continues, just maybe for different reasons now, economic rather than purely ideological.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
And it's not just Han Chinese culture. We also have to talk about the silent erosion of minority cultures.
You mean like in Xinjiang in Tibet?
Precisely. This is systematic suppression. Since 2017, credible reports and satellite imagery suggest thousands, maybe over 8,000 mosques in Xinjiang have been damaged or outright demolished. These aren't just buildings, they're the heart of Uyghur cultural and religious life.
A direct attack on their identity.
Undeniably. And look at Tibetan Buddhist institutions. Major centers of learning like Lorong Gar and Yarching Gar have been significantly downsized, monks and nuns forcibly removed, residences destroyed. It's an attempt to control and curtail Tibetan Buddhism.
And it goes beyond buildings, right? Language, customs.
Absolutely. There's widespread language and customs suppression. Policies pushing Mandarin education over local languages like Uyghur, Tibetan, Mongolian. Critics call it forced assimilation or de-ethnicization, trying to dilute distinct identities into a more homogeneous Han-centric model.
This feels like forcing your cousin to change their name, stop speaking their dialect, wear different clothes, and then if you see someone else appreciating their original traditional culture, you shout, "That's my family's culture," even though you were the one trying to erase it.
It's a stark contrast. You label these things internally as backward or separatist, try to suppress them. But if elements of that culture are preserved or appreciated elsewhere, suddenly it's all part of the glorious Chinese heritage that needs reclaiming. It raises serious questions about motive. Is it about genuinely valuing the culture or just about asserting control over the narrative?
Which leads to a really interesting hypothetical, right? The Taiwan question.
Ah, yes. This is a fascinating thought experiment. What if Taiwan has preserved cultural elements, languages, traditions, arts that have been lost or suppressed on the mainland?
Which they have, in
Right.
many cases. Like local dialects, Hokkien, Hakka, indigenous cultures. Taiwan's approach has been quite different.
Very different. They've often actively worked to preserve and revitalize these things, sometimes seeing themselves as guardians of traditions that were under attack during the PRC's more radical phases. So the question is, would the CCP look at those preserved traditions in Taiwan and also say mine? Mine?
Given their claim over Taiwan.
Yeah.
Probably.
Logically, yes. If Taiwan is considered part of one China, then its cultural heritage, from Beijing's perspective, is also part of Chinese culture. So they could absolutely extend the mine logic to claim stewardship over traditions flourishing in Taiwan but diminished on the mainland.
But Taiwan would see it completely differently, I assume.
Oh, completely. They'd likely say, no, this is our heritage, which we preserved precisely because we didn't go through your destructive campaigns. We saved it. They'd assert their own cultural identity and autonomy, framing their preservation efforts as distinct from, and maybe even corrective to, the mainland's history.
So it highlights this fundamental clash again. Is culture something to be centrally controlled and claimed, or something diverse that flourishes through local preservation and pluralism?
Exactly. Taiwan's more open, democratic society tends towards the latter, celebrating diversity, debating openly. The mainland's approach is more top-down, emphasizing unity under a single narrative. The hypothetical really throws that difference into sharp relief.
It really makes you question whether the goal is protecting culture itself, or just controlling who gets to wave the flag of ownership.
So pulling all these threads together, it's messy, isn't it?
Understatement of the year.
The whole mine thing. Look, it clearly taps into genuine feelings of national pride, and it's definitely fueled by a real sense of historical grievance about colonialism and past wrongs. You can't dismiss that emotion.
No, the history of exploitation is real.
But it also massively oversimplifies things. It ignores the legitimate ways things were acquired. It overlooks the huge internal destruction, and it kind of bypasses the whole conversation about global heritage and the value of international access and preservation.
It feels more like, as you said, a cultural emotional battle than a straightforward legal or historical case in many instances.
I think that's fair. Which is why, if we want to think clearly about this, we need a more balanced view. That means acknowledging the complexity. Yes, some things were stolen, others were bought, others were sold by Chinese people, others might have been destroyed if they'd stayed. It's not one size fits all.
Right. Nuance is key.
And we need to promote dialogue over confrontation. Screaming matches rarely get artifacts returned. Negotiation, cooperation, understanding international law, building trust, that's usually more effective. We also have to recognize the value of global access. Millions learn about Chinese culture because of these items in museums worldwide. That has value too.
And finally,
avoid extreme nationalism. Pride is one thing, but when it becomes blind ideology, it just distorts history and shuts down genuine understanding. It can actually harm the cause of cultural preservation in the long run.
it really comes back to that analogy we kept hitting. It's like, first, maybe you threw out some family heirlooms yourself, calling them junk. Then maybe you tried to claim your neighbor's family tree was actually yours. And now, seeing other people taking amazing care of the stuff you discarded or sold off, you point and cry, "Thief! You stole my treasure." It just doesn't track logically when you see the whole story.
It doesn't. And if we truly care about culture, not just national talking points, then the focus has to be on robust preservation wherever that happens best and open sharing across borders. And crucially, on understanding the full, uncomfortable truth of history, both the external aggressions and the internal mistakes.
Wow. Okay. That was definitely a deep dive. We went from mine in the museum, to the Cultural Revolution, Tomb Raiders, Taiwan, the whole complex web. Hopefully it gave everyone listening something to chew on, maybe a new lens for the next museum visit.
Absolutely. It's just a reminder that history, especially cultural history, is rarely black and white. It's usually got more layers than, more layers than a really, really old multi-layered silk scroll.
Huh. Perfect.
Yeah.
All right, if you enjoyed this Sip and Talk and you want more conversations that kind of make you think, maybe challenge your assumptions.
Yeah.
You know what to do. Hit that subscribe button wherever you get your podcasts.
And hey, while you're doing that, seriously, check out our buddy Mickey's YouTube channel. It's called Mickey to Life. He does awesome stuff, memes, music, wine tasting, travel vlogs, just genuinely fun content. Mickey to Life. Go find it.
Definitely check them out. So until next time, keep sipping, keep talking.
And keep thinking. Bye, everyone.